sir.
Howdy,
Good to
howdy,
see
howdy.
you.
All right, everyone, welcome Royce.
Good morning. Hey, good morning.
So it's new. It's been a long time since
It
you've been
has
here.
been
I mean,
physically,
months.
Well, I was on virtually, so thank y'all for last time allowing me to come on virtually at the last minute. It was pretty cool, y'all. But y'all have it all set up pretty nicely in here.
Working hard, man.
But it's good to be here. We had a great weekend with Taylor Swift. I heard somebody just mentioning that. Look. I mean,
where's your bracelets? Yeah.
I didn't get a bracelet.
You need some more friends.
I do.
Okay.
I do. Yeah,
Right.
I didn't get the experience, but as a New Orleanian, I got to tell you, it was great just to see the city shine, to see the city perform as well as it did, and to see so many people with smiles on their faces. I did not understand how big she was and is.
We could hardly work on Friday here.
Yeah.
And I don't even care about
exciting.
Taylor either.
Yeah.
It was just like I want to go see what's happening in the city.
Exactly.
More
Same.
than like, really as much or more than Mardi Gras.
Yeah.
It was
Businesses, restaurants did great, so it was great. So all is good.
I saw Michael Heck put out a $700 million figure.
I think it was $200 million, but in total, I think just from ticket sales, that was the number I recall. So maybe there was some other revenue.
Yeah,
that
so
was
200,
included there.
then Fox did 500, and I was like,
Okay.
no way.
Yeah,
and then
wow.
somebody told me this morning that
Okay.
Michael Heck, said 700 million
Okay.
impact, which
Yeah,
you can't even track it, I guess. But
no, yes, that's a big number.
it's insane.
Yeah.
And so, like, when we think about bringing in things or incentivizing people to come in, is that a part of the equation that you've seen at the Senate, that those conversations happen,
Sure.
or at the city level?
Sure. Well, I mean, look, New Orleans is a tourist town. That's what we do. That's what we do. We have a Super Bowl that's coming. That's going to be potentially transformative in many ways. So much of the conversation that we have at the state level is often around protecting New Orleans. How do we keep it safe? How do we keep it clean? How do we keep it presentable in a way that when people come here, they say this is a place that we can not only visit, but we can schedule future conferences and future major events like Taylor Swift, like the Super Bowl. So that's often the conversation. Unfortunately, the other part of the conversation at the state level is we get caught up in a lot of these social wedge issues, these culture war issues that I think have more of a detrimental impact to trying to attract big events, because we're talking about things around gender, sexuality, women's rights, women's reproductive rights, and I think all of that, from where I sit, sends a bad message on the economic side. So that's oftentimes where we're in the space of. But I'm asking for support from the state, for financial support, additional resources, always to make sure we can shine our brightest. And I think we saw some great partnerships this last week.
Yeah, those conversations for us in the past have gone, we understand somewhere in rural Louisiana somebody like truly believes something about some social issue.
Right.
And they may believe it in their heart and their soul, this is the way that it should be. But sometimes the state doesn't understand the economic impact of losing a huge convention or multiple huge conventions to the state, and what we could actually do with that good money. Right.
And thankfully that hasn't happened yet in New Orleans. We've seen it happen in North Carolina and other places, but we don't ever want that to happen. And so
I'd be surprised if it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
I would be surprised.
Yeah.
So let's talk about like what happened here though with Taylor Swift, and your district is Central City, and the homeless being pushed out last minute, and that being blocked by a judge. What is your stance on that? What was your message to the governor?
Yeah, so not only do I represent Central City, I live in Central City. I live about a block away from the Cali Open encampment. So I'm impacted by it in many ways, because I mean, a lot of those individuals walk in front of my house. People, will end up sleeping on the street corner. So it's very real and personal to me. But it's also, most of the district that I represent, I'd say probably 95% of the homelessness is in the district I represent along Cali Oak, and what was once along the Claiborne corridor. So it's something that I think the city has made a lot of progress in. We've seen multiple encampments to be decommissioned. We saw the Chapatoulas encampment decommissioned and beautified. We've seen the Treme encampment decommissioned, and there's still work to do there from a beautification standpoint. And the last major encampment that was still there was along the Cali Oak, and I say it's still there. It just got moved a couple of yards towards Home Depot, so it's a little less visible. my thoughts on it are as follows. The people of New Orleans want those encampments decommissioned. We also want those people to get the help they need so that they don't immediately return back to homelessness. The problem that I have in the manner in which it was done, I have several problems with it, and I articulated that to the governor and members of his team. We had a meeting 2 days ago at UMC to sort of discuss the path forward. I think it was an unnecessary show of force. I think it was done not just for the purpose of cleaning up the space, but it was done to send a message that New Orleans, you all can't do it, so we're going to do it for you.
Right.
Because it could have been done in a way where it was more collaborative to set a tone of partnership. These ideas aren't really anything new, but partnerships matter, and how you work with people matters. So I think it was done with a sense of undermining local government. And I think that sometimes you have to sit at the table and hit reset. Say, look, we want to clean this up too. We can do it together. But to just come in unilaterally, they said that the people had till Thursday, but they came in on Wednesday, right? So I think there were some things in the manner in which it was done that I think were unnecessary. Secondly, nobody was housed. Okay, they would just say, "Look, you have to move over here," right?
And we're throwing away your stuff. Yep.
Yeah. So now there's been some changes up at the U.S. Supreme Court that I think gives municipalities more of an ability to take acts like that. So legally, we don't know what the outcome is going to be. I know that an injunction was granted temporarily, and there's going to be a hearing on November 4th to determine how the state can move going forward. But the message the conversation we had 2 days ago with the governor's office, with state police, local officials, was what is the need? What is the need? How can the state help us going forward? Because their mission is to have all of this done by Super Bowl. So there's an $8 million ask of the city from the state to help with programming, case management, assisting people with getting housed. That's still a very tight window to get all of this done. So we're working right now to try to find some emergency funding, and work in a more trying to reestablish some trust.
Some trust,
right?
Okay.
But it's obviously something that we need to address, and I just want to commend the local leaders, Nate Fields, Leslie Harris, and many of those people who've been putting a lot of work in to try to address this. And again, nobody is opposed to the efforts to decommission the encampments, but the manner in which it's done, I think, matters.
So when we talked to Nate Fields, who's the director of homelessness, we talked about how to do this the right way, and how but we look at the models like Houston that is doing it the right way. I mean, their budget's like $100 million. Yeah. How do we afford this? Is the money the problem?
Well, if you talk to people at Unity, if you talk to people like Nate, their response is generally that it's money. But we know this is something that we cannot just continue to just pour money into. So it's several things that's going to take. I don't think money is the sole factor. It will take consistency. I think sometimes just consistency in management is the key. The truth is, though, that we don't have many people to go out there and do the casework, the management that's necessary.
The labor,
it takes real labor, and it's hard. I mean, I don't know anybody in this room maybe there is, but who's going to want to go out there at 6 a.m. to identify somebody, check on them, see how they're doing, and do the type of work it's going to take to actually get someone housed and keep them housed. So actually hiring these caseworkers is a challenge. That's what's been communicated to me.
Okay.
And there's always going to be disagreement about how this money is being spent and whether or not you truly need this much money. And my message to Unity and to Nate Fields when we met 2 days ago was that you all have to be very clear and very specific on how this money is going to be used, because the state's not going to cut a check just because you said this is what you need. You have to show every dollar on how it's going to be spent, and I think then you can make a better argument for the resources.
Yeah, and accountability.
Yeah.
On the other side.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the state coming in and doing the state's work in our community, and Troop NOLA has been that image to everyone. What is your take on the good, bad, and the ugly with Trupnola.
Yeah, so I think the presence generally is a welcomed presence from most of the people that I talk to, most of my constituents, and that's just not in Senate District 5, that's across the city, New Orleans East, Lower Ninth Ward, Algiers. So we know that response times were too long, so Trupnola can help with that. Trupnola can also, and has been helping with a lot of the preventative work, trying to go after folks who may have warrants out. Some of the issues and complaints that I hear, which are legit, are police chases, often in crashes in a small city. And a big part of the reason why in the consent decree, NOPD was prohibited from engaging in police chases was because of the danger that it poses.
Right.
I was just on the phone with a young woman yesterday who, innocent, minding her business, had a 3-year-old newborn in the back seat, and state police engaged in a chase, and the person who they were chasing totaled her vehicle. Her vehicle spun around like 3 times with her 3-year-old son in the back. These types of things happen when you engage in police chases. And I think the jury is still out in many ways with respect to how we conduct those chases, but ultimately I think it's been a welcome presence, and I think it's been positive so far, with the exception of what I just mentioned.
Yeah.
But overall, I think it's been good.
It's been like a surprisingly good thing.
Yeah.
I think for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Housing Trust Fund that's on the ballot next Tuesday. So this is meant to bring in development and consistently. The opposition would say it doesn't need to be part of the charter. It could be an ordinance, and that it's one of the largest in the country. I think second behind San Francisco, and the amount of funds that it would dedicate. What's your take on the fund?
So I think this is a crucial issue for us as a city right now, and I think it takes leadership. Anything as crucial as housing and as important as housing requires people to be bold, and being bold makes people uncomfortable. Being bold oftentimes disrupts the status quo. So for me, the reasons that are put forth as to why we shouldn't do it this way, by not putting it in the charter, actually makes the point as to why we should put it in the charter. And what I mean by that is there will be new leadership. There's going to be a new council. There's going to be a new mayor. So that's unpredictability. So just because we have a council right now that prioritizes housing, I think they've seeded $17 million, this locks it in. Housing is that important. I think it's a statement by the city to say housing is this important. And the part that we need to be clear about is this. Every year there's going to be an advisory committee that has to make proposals to the council that can be voted up or down. So nothing's set in stone, but we know that we're going to have 2% of the annual general fund that's set aside for housing, and it'll be for us as a city to decide how we want those dollars to be spent within housing, whether it's for new affordable housing, whether it's for new rental housing or home ownership programs. And on top of that, there's a safety valve where if the city council decides, hey, we don't want to do this year, they can unanimously vote to not do it. And so it doesn't, so there are some outs, but I still believe fundamentally that housing is so crucial. Housing is so important, and you all know better than anybody, given the work that you all do, that in my opinion, this should be something we all unify around. And I get it philosophically. Some people just don't like the idea of tying things to a charter. I don't subscribe to that because every year there's going to be a budget crunch, right? That's how we have to think about it. So what happens is when funds are tight, we take the path of least resistance, and if we were to prioritize housing to begin with, we probably wouldn't be in the scenario that we're in now. And we've seen other cities do it. You mentioned San Francisco, but there's also Pittsburgh, Atlanta, Austin. Other cities are doing this, and I'm going to go back to the point that I made earlier. Doing bold things is not easy. People are usually going to push back, right? Yep. But the only way we're going to address this issue is by having vocal leadership on it. So I want to thank Councilmember Harris for her leadership on it.
She was here a few weeks ago, and so I wanted to make sure you answered before we really took a stance like publicly. But we are in support of the initiative. Development in the city is very, very difficult, and we hear that across every single person that comes on the stage, whether it's the architect, or people trying to build hotels here. They just don't want to deal with the inconsistency
Right.
Of what's happening in the city. I look at the discretionary funds for the city, and that's about 50% of the budget, right? We're at a $1.5 billion budget, right?
Right.
I mean,
Right. We're not even talking about that much in the grand scheme for something as important as housing.
7 years ago, it was $1 billion budget.
Right.
I mean, the increase of
Right.
the money that we have at hand is huge.
Right.
Because of COVID, we have about $150 million cash on hands of reserves, which, I mean, thank God we finally have reserves, right?
Right.
I mean, we wouldn't have the mess of the Department of Defense facility on Poland if we had the reserves whenever that rainstorm happened. So it totally makes sense. Could it be a little bit better? Sure, but
Always. Always.
We got to move towards some sort of progress.
Yeah, we can't let perfection be the enemy of progress.
That's nailed it. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about affordability, though, right? And every time we ever grab you, we have to talk insurance.
Sure.
We just had a hell of a storm season.
Yeah.
I mean, the effects on insurance, even to us, not being hit hard, we're still going to feel it, and that we can't. It's hard to imagine. I mean, that's like the worst thought and news to our agents and to homeowners.
Right.
What is your vision and path forward of how the country solves this, how the city solves? I mean, at all levels, what's the way out?
Right. So I think going back to the point we said earlier, I went to my first NCOIL conference this year. It was in California. This is the National Council of Insurance Legislators. I serve on the Senate Insurance Committee, and the good thing is that we have several members of the Orleans delegation who serve on Insurance Committee on the House side as well. I'm the only one from the on the Senate side. So I've been getting more involved in this whole conversation around insurance and learning about what other states are dealing with, learning how we address this not only at the state level but the federal level. I think there's a real conversation we need to start having about how federal government can assist. Now, the National Flood Program has had its challenges, but the reason I'm saying we have to think beyond just the borders of Louisiana is because when a storm comes, it doesn't discriminate between East Texas and Southwest Louisiana. It doesn't discriminate between Southeast Louisiana and the western border of Mississippi. So even if we take more of a regional approach, right, we got to think beyond the borders of our state. So there should be some conversations around some sort of like cooperative, shared agreements amongst states. I think that's an idea that we need to explore more heavily. And we also need to talk about how the federal government can come up with some sort of support programs beyond what's happening now, because right now it's just the states kind of shooting in the dark. Right now in our state, as you all know, we are clearly in a crisis. One of the biggest things we've tried to do at the state level is address the issue around fortified roofs. We did the incentive program 2 years ago for the $45 million, and I can't say that that's had a whole lot of success. The idea was to incentivize companies to come here to do business, and the new insurance commissioner pretty much got all that he asked for in this last session with creating a climate of competitiveness for insurers, and I'm not yet aware of any real progress yet that we've seen for more companies coming in wanting to write business.
How many companies are you seeing that are
I think
actually
there's
writing?
like 8, I want to say.
Yeah.
So, the commissioner and I, we have our disagreements. One of the things that I've tried to lean in on is the area of strengthening homes, strengthening roofs. We're going into a tax session next week that you all probably heard of, and one of the items that was added to the call will be redirecting some more money into the fortified roof program. So I think that's probably the quickest and most effective way to address it, because stronger roofs should leave lower risk.
Right. Significantly.
Yeah, but the problem we have with the fortified roof program, and this is why I brought the bill I brought last year, was that there's no guarantee you're going to get a reduction. The legislation says that you're entitled to an actuarially justified reduction. That's basically just the insurance company deciding whether or not it works for them. So I brought a bill that would have a 20% mandate, and of course they fought me on it. But once we ultimately got the bill passed, it requires the Department of Insurance to publish what the suggested discount should be based upon zip code, based upon size of home, et cetera. So it was a small step, but there needs to be more transparency around what the expected reduction should be, because you or I shouldn't spend $30,000 fortifying our roof without there being some guaranteed rate reduction. We know that there are instances where people have not gotten a reduction. So that's the challenge with the fortified roof program right now.
Yeah,
Alabama has a required reduction.
Because I think we try to incentivize a lot of this after Katrina, right? I mean, a lot of these programs aren't new, and the discounts aren't new. But I think that our clients actually can understand math and return on investment.
Right.
And when they look at, I can do this thing, but I mean, if it brings my insurance down a couple $1,000s, but I'm spending an extra $10,000, that's
right.
You know,
and I think it's horrible. It's horrible public policy for the state to put money into a program where citizens can draw down $10,000 grants, but there's no guaranteed discount. It's good for the homeowner in some ways, but the homeowner's probably still going to have to come out of pocket, and there's no guaranteed rate reduction, a premium reduction. So I think that's the next step that we have to do. But in addition to the fortified roof, there needs to be some real discussion around how the feds can support us. I reached out to Congressman Troy Carter to get his input. We're in conversation about seeing what's possible. I'm not interested in selling a dream or selling something that's not possible. I know it would be a serious uphill battle, but I think we're in a very perilous time.
No, I think the conversation's ripe.
Yeah.
A year ago, I think, and this is before what we saw happen in the Carolinas, but we're like, wow, finally people are understanding with fires and everything. This isn't just a hurricane problem in one portion of the country.
Right.
And you hate to say it's taking pain for other people to fill it, but yeah, I would totally agree. If it was some sort of federal or regional, if somebody writes in this one place, well, they also have to write over here. Right. Makes sense. What is the number one thing that you're like passionate about over the course of your whole career? Like, what's the thing that like actually gets you excited and motivated to do this wonderful, incredibly well-paid job that you do?
Yeah, that's it. That's the reason why. I do it for the money. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. We're going to have to make sure the chatbots, when they transcribe this, they say he's doing it for the money.
No, it's sarcasm. Yeah.
Can they detect the sarcasm?
Actually, look, public service is a calling. It's a calling. I believe that. It doesn't always make a lot of logical sense. And it's unfortunate that the state legislature pays so little, because it disincentivizes anybody who really wants to serve from going into it. You have to either be independently wealthy, retired, or whatever to do it, or just be willing to make the sacrifice. I'm fortunate in that I can still somewhat manage a solo law practice, but I stumbled into this, quite honestly. I never saw myself in public service. I am a native New Orleanian, where after Hurricane Katrina, the first election that was conducted, it was a local election, city council. I volunteered on a campaign for someone who I didn't know. He was friends with a friend of mine, and I was planning to go to law school that fall. I always saw myself being like a corporate lawyer or business person, entrepreneur, really making money, right?
Yeah. Real money.
Yeah, making real money.
I love New Orleans.
Yeah. But I volunteered on this campaign. This was going on 20 years ago, and it was the moment, right? Because after he won, he asked me to be his chief of staff. I had made a promise to myself to go to law school, but I made an agreement that I'd work for him for a year as his chief of staff. I was 23 at the time, but it showed me the importance of good public servants, people who cared about people, not just their own personal interests, and people who were serious about public policy, and who didn't go into it for a career, but rather went into it to serve for a moment, right? And then you move on and you go do something else with your life. So that's what I did. I went to law school, and then I, again, went to the private sector, but got called back into it, and that's when I realized, and I don't want to bore y'all all with my bio, but the thing that drives me the most is giving people a sense of confidence that you can have good leadership, you deserve good leadership, and that while no one is perfect, the process isn't perfect, that competent leadership matters, and that it makes a difference in people's lives. So when I encounter a constituent who just says, thank you because you helped me with this issue, that it just kind of was a thing that I could do because I was in this position. That's the most gratifying thing for me. If it's just working on a bill that we know probably isn't going to get passed, but to let those constituents know we care about this issue and we're fighting for you, that's where my gratification comes from. And I've never seen this as a career. So it's not a particular issue, if you will, whether it's housing or criminal justice or economic development. For me, it's about raising the standard of expectations for what people should have in their elected leadership, and giving people a sense of confidence. That's what drives me.
And you're involved in a number of nonprofits, one of which I wasn't aware of, the Silverback Society, and it's doing just that, right?
Yeah.
Can you talk just a bit about its mission and why?
Yeah. I mean, being involved in organizations like the Silverback Society, which is essentially a mentorship organization, it's a group of men who give up a couple of hours a week to go into a 7th grade or 8th grade classroom, and you form these partnerships and these bonds with these schools, and you're talking to young men about the principles of leadership, about the principles of service, about the principles of being a good citizen. And I mean, these men are like salt of the earth, right? I mean, these are like coaches, business people, folks who just, they're not looking for anything. They just want to help these young men. And it was intentional because there's science and a lot of data went into this around choosing these young men at the 7th grade level, particularly because that's when they're at like that juncture between going this direction or going that direction, because we know all of the pressures that they face in what can sometimes be the mean streets in New Orleans. So I started volunteering with the Silverback Society. In fact, Mr. Lloyd Dennis, who founded the program, he really wanted it for it to be for men who were like married and like in their 50s. I wasn't married at the time. I was in like my 30s, and I was like, you have to let me be a part of this.
Okay.
But I've just always.
So you've grown into it.
Yeah. I mean,
married and
yeah, exactly. Now I meet the criteria. But yeah, love the Silverback Society and so many other organizations that I've volunteered and been a part of.
Okay, let's talk about criminal justice.
Yeah.
I think that's been a big part of your passion. We are referred to in the worst terms as the world's capital prison, and all these things. We rank at either number 1, number 2 in the country, sometimes in the world. We're in that top 10 list. Incarceration rate is just extraordinary here. What's up with that? From your perspective? I mean, how did we get there? Is that justified?
I'm going to start off to answer the question of how we got there. If anybody has an hour of time, if you're into museums or history, go to the Historic New Orleans Collection down there in the French Quarter. It's fantastic. The latest exhibit is called Captive State, and it gives the best illustration of how Louisiana became the incarceration capital of the world. It's not pushing an agenda. It's literally all facts. It's really, really great. I strongly encourage you to go. It's going to be there for the next several months. It's called Captive State. And it gives you a great illustration of a lot of things that we already know. But I'll sum it up to say that in today's world, crime in general, crime as an issue has always been visceral. It's very emotional. And fear is one of the greatest political tools ever used. And it's constantly used as a way to...
It is?
Yeah. Wait. Oh,
Just kidding.
obviously, right. I mean,
coming up
so
with the election next week.
yeah. But no. But I'm saying that connects to policy decision making, right? So the data doesn't support a lot of the policy decisions that oftentimes get made. So when you're trying to have real thoughtful debates around how do we make our community safer, and we ignore the data, that leads to bad decision making.
Right.
In 2017, the state of Louisiana did something a little different. We actually used data. We said, okay, we're the incarceration capital of the world, but we're no safer. If this was the method, we should be the safest place in the world. So the Edwards administration worked with the Pew Research Center, and everybody got in the room. I wasn't in the legislature at the time. I was at the Louisiana Supreme Court, and I was involved working with Chief Justice Johnson on a lot of this policy making to just focus on data. That incarceration alone does not make us any safer. Again, I know I'm saying what we already know, but I think Louisiana, historically, if you just go back to how tied we are to the prison industrial complex and what it means for a lot of communities economically, you'll see why we're so dependent upon continuing to invest in that, because there is literally a lot of dependence on it. And
I mean, just the economies of running a prison system.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Have you ever been to Angola?
I have.
You've been to Angola? No. I'm not saying you need to go. Look, just going to captive state is enough. Angola is, you don't want to go there if you don't have to, but I've been there multiple times, and you'll see a lot of the history even there. It was formerly a plantation, right? And I think today we're still making a lot of decisions around policy that are just wrong-headed. This last session, the crime session, none of it was going to make us safer. I mean,
so is it shorter sentences? Is it less actual people going to prison? Is it more probation? I'm like, what is that calculus there that the conversation's being had?
Well, during the crime session, we essentially got rid of probate. We essentially got rid of parole. So we extended sentences. You think about the cost. You think about the impact that's going to have on fewer fathers being in the homes in a lot of these communities. It has devastating ripple effects.
So you think we're still going backwards?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we were moving in the right direction, but in this new climate, we are absolutely going backwards, and it's easy to sell by saying, well, we need to do something about the crime, but if we're not using data and reality, then we're making bad decisions. So what we're not talking about enough is that violent crime is down dramatically. I want to say it's down like 40%.
40%,
right? We had the steepest decline in violent crime in the city of New Orleans, probably more than anywhere else in the country. Right? So when people are talking about how dangerous and violent it is in the city of New Orleans, it's just simply not true.
Right.
Okay? But there are some people who are so vested in the narrative that you can't walk out your home without getting a gun put in your face. There are people who depend on that narrative to feed whatever it is that they're selling, right? So we have to be honest about when the crime is up and how we deal with it and respond to it, but we also have to be honest about when crime is down and how do we keep it down and sustain it, as opposed to falling victim to the narrative of, oh, we have to get out here and do something. And I'm more interested today in elevating the discussion and elevating partnerships that are going to keep the crime down, right? And that's more investment in economic development, more investment in education, more investment in infrastructure, and creating opportunities that are going to keep these young people from a life of crime. That's why I'm so invested in organizations like the Silverback Society. It's much easier to build strong boys and girls than it is to fix broken men and women, and it's often cheaper.
Yep.
So, I'm all about front end investment.
I'll tell you, like, my big personal concern is having jobs that pay well and industries that pay well, a diverse economy in New Orleans, right? Because I think with that, you bring in leaders. I think a lot of people that grow up here tend to leave here to pursue maybe that corporate job that makes more money somewhere else, or opportunities that just purely don't exist here if you're not in healthcare or hospitality. How do we bring in that economic growth in more businesses? I mean, in the last 10 years, I think the city has had one company bring in like 2,000 IT jobs, and that was the biggest celebration that we've had.
Right.
That's not significant,
right,
in my mind.
Right. I think education is a huge part of it. Workforce training is a huge part of it, so we can do more.
Which we do a lot
yeah,
here.
Yeah,
with the
locally for sure,
universities.
for sure. But I think we can do more. So companies have to feel like there's going to be people that they can employ.
Yep.
And I'm not a CEO or a general manager, but that's common sense. They
Right.
need to have an employable workforce. There's a part of it too that I think is connected to the criminal justice conversation that we just talked about. It's not as high up on the scale as education and workforce training, but I think reentry programs matter. I'm also a big proponent of giving people their opportunity to go back to work once they have done their time, because if we're keeping folks hit with a scarlet letter, and you basically make them unemployable, which is another challenge that we face at the legislature.
Specifically, we're talking about hiring people with a felony.
Yeah, hiring people. I mean, there are still jobs that they can do, but the jobs you're talking about, big jobs, right, that pay really well, we got to utilize our assets. This city was built on a port, right? And as a state, as a city, we haven't remained the leader from utilizing our port. Now, there's a big investment going on to around the container ship terminal that I think can be transformative for our economy. I really do. And distribution hubs in New Orleans East, there's so much that can happen there. And while there's still some issues to work out with that, I think that can be one of the areas that can be transformative for our economy.
And LNG, yeah.
But the other big piece is how we talk about the city, right? When you make hiring decisions here at your business, you're going to look at the resume, but you're also going to do references, right? What do people say about this person? What's this person's reputation? How are they viewed?
Right.
All that factors into whether you make a decision to do business with a person. I think the same thing matters in terms of when people decide to come to this city. How we talk about ourselves, how we sell ourselves, how we present ourselves matters. So the numbers, that's important in the data, but how do we sell our city? Like, do we talk about ourselves as a city where companies should come, or do we talk about ourselves as being just a city with no hope? Right. So we all need to do a gut check. We all need to do a reality check. And New Orleans, in my opinion, is one of the greatest cities on planet Earth.
Yep.
Because we have certain intangibles that you cannot manufacture, okay? And while we can look at other cities to emulate what they've done, we're going to go into this tax session next week to have this conversation around what needs to change around the corporate income tax, around the corporate franchise tax, around the income, around the personal income tax. We're going to have these discussions, and I think that's a big part of it. But how do we talk about our state? How do we talk about our city? Because we are a special place.
Yep.
You can't manufacture the culture. You can't manufacture the people. We're a real town. And I think companies would love to come here if they know that when it rains, it's not going to flood, right?
Well, or there's consistency in government. I mean,
confidence. Confidence.
That I can buy and operate the way that I was told I could.
Yeah, that's true.
Income tax, is it going away?
No, income taxes are not going away. The proposal that's on the table right now is for there to be a lowering of the personal income tax, so that there will be, instead of it being stepped based on income, it would be one flat rate. I will tell you that there are many bills that have to all pass in order for the math to work. And even if all of the package does pass, it's still questionable whether or not it's going to be revenue neutral. We have to have a balanced budget. And when you're talking about lowering taxes on one end and then getting rid of credits and exemptions on another end, there's a lot of dispute as to whether or not that money is going to balance out. Yep. So I really don't have any predictions at this point, but the proposal to get rid of income taxes right now, that's not one of them. Okay. I'm personally concerned about the historic tax credits, because I represent a district that has benefited significantly from that, and I would not want to see that go away. There's other things on the table, so there'll be a lot of debate over the next 20-something days.
Yeah, I mean, that is also on the chopping block. I mean, that is not...
Yeah, it's very significant.
You have a big fight ahead.
Yeah.
And so all of our elected officials already know our opinion on that, right? I mean, that's not even... we don't even have to go...
we don't have to go into that.
Yeah, you know that. You posted an interesting video on your Instagram in the last few weeks.
Was it me? Yeah,
I think it was you. I mean, you were on your front porch with your family, and it really sounded like you were making a move on the city of New Orleans as a potential candidate for mayor.
I've heard that. Yeah.
Everyone, go watch it later.
Yeah.
Tell me, I'm not.
Yeah, I'd love your feedback on the video. I thought it came out really nice.
Yeah.
It was a video in support of the Housing Trust Fund, but it was also a video just to share my feelings about the city and where we are. You know, it was obviously not an announcement, and I don't think it's a secret that I'm seriously considering. I will also share that I'm getting a lot of encouragement. I did not go into this with any position in mind. It's never been about the position for me. But as I've shared throughout our discussion,
trust me, running for mayor is not about the position.
Correct.
Right?
It can't be.
Well, no,
it can't be. It has to be about
the last
the
several
job.
elections.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been here and we've tried to rally good people to run.
Yeah.
We're like begging good people to run. So, with a brain on their head and some experience in government.
Yeah.
You know? So no, we got it.
Yeah.
You're not doing this because.
Yeah. So right now, I have a pretty heavy plate with what's going on in the Senate right now. We have an election on Tuesday that we got to get through. So I'm fully focused on where I am now. I'm seriously considering, haven't made a final decision, but I'm going to do what I think is best for, number one, me and my family, and the city of New Orleans. So, you know, it all has to work, and I'm going to listen to the community. I'm going to observe and see how this thing shapes up over the next several weeks or months. Okay. And, you know, I'm going to do what I think is right to best serve and be in a position to have the most impact. Yeah.
Okay. I know we have a couple questions. What did I not ask you, though?
You know, I think we covered a lot. We could keep going.
We'll take a couple questions real quick.
I think the housing fund is really important to this room specifically. What are some points that we can share?
The first thing is you have to emphasize that it is not a new tax, right? That's the first thing. We are in a dystopian state of politics, policies. I was talking to some women the other day. I do my little street polls. You know, I just check them like, you know, how'd you vote, right? Just to kind of get a sense of where the people are. And they say, we just voted against everything. I don't even know if they read it. We just vote no, right? A lot of people feel that way because they're upset with government. We have to, number one, tell people it's not a new tax. The second thing I think we emphasize is that, ask them a question, housing is an issue in New Orleans, is it not? Right? So if they don't have a better proposal to deal with it, we have to lean in and we have to be direct and say that this is a big step that we need to take, right? So, and I would question any elected official right now who isn't being vocal about this, because it's like, when do we deal with the issue of housing? If we're not going to deal with it now, when do we deal with it, right? So people need to be really cornered on that, all right? But I think we emphasize the fact that it's not a new tax. You also want to emphasize that. What's that? It's not taken away from anything else. And here's the other point, that there's going to be an advisory committee that comes up with annual proposals of how the money gets used that the council and the mayor have to sign off on. And there's also a mechanism where they could vote to not do it. It has to be a unanimous vote, but that's another point of, and when they say, well, we don't think we should tie the hands of government. No, sometimes we do need to tie the hands of government because we don't know who the next mayor is going to be. We don't know who the next city council is going to be. And they could come in with a whole different vision and say, you know what, we're not going to deal with housing. So those are the points that I would try to emphasize. Yeah.
Great. Joe.
Mine is also around the housing. I come from a perspective of my aunt worked at Unity for many years, also the Harry Thompson Center. Then I had some Unity people placed next to me, and it was potentially the worst year of my life. Mm. And so I'm wondering.
There were tenants in.
Tenants,
okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. They were being housed.
Correct.
Got it. Okay.
Unity was nowhere to be found. after these people were placed next door to me. So my question is, is there anything in place as far as preparing people to be put into neighborhoods and how to live in these places and how to respect a home? And also any type of follow-up that would be by the entities that are putting them into place? Like, how do we tell our landlords that they're not going to have to completely renovate their property after these people are there?
That's an excellent question. So that is Unity's job. That's what they're charged with doing. And I will tell you, as someone who's been involved in many of these conversations, Unity is often pointed to as a big part of the problem. I haven't fully made that conclusion, but many of the people who work on this in different sectors point to a lot of the missteps that mismanagement, I should say. It's challenging because every city, in order to receive these federal grants that we get from HUD, the way that it's set up is that there has to be one agency, one entity that is the coordinating agency. And for the city of New Orleans, it's Unity. And that based on your question, I believe that falls squarely within the job of Unity, to be able to work with these individuals when they're being housed and setting expectations around what it's going to require. So that is a challenge that you pointed out, but that is with the agency who is doing the case management and working to keep people housed. Now we have an office of homelessness with Nate Fields, who I also want to commend, very dedicated, very committed to serving this community, and they've taken a more active role in some of the case management as well. But the large umbrella around the coordination and placement falls within the jurisdiction of Unity. Yeah, so we can elevate those conversations, and that's something that I'm willing to do, and I'm glad you raised that with me here today, because I'll try to get some specifics for you and do some follow-up around what does that look like. When you have tenants who you're trying to incentivize, when you have landlords who you're trying to incentivize to take on certain tenants who, we're trying to get them permanent supportive housing, but people don't want to do it because of the reasons you just pointed out. How can we improve that process? Yeah.
In regards,
Hey.
good to see you.
Hey, Tina.
In regards to the historic tax credit, so obviously New Orleans greatly benefits from the entertainment industry.
Right.
But so did Baton Rouge and like St. Francisville and Shreveport.
Right.
Shreveport really had a big, I don't know if they still do. Is there some way to, is there unity among those big cities? Like Shreveport is, the economic engine of the North Louisiana.
Right.
We certainly have to see the value in the whole state for this.
Mm-hmm.
So do you, just your personal opinion, really think that will go away? Because to us, that seems ludicrous.
Yeah, so my personal opinion is that it will not. Now, whether they make some adjustments and make it not as attractive as it is today, I could see a scenario where they make some changes to it. My personal belief is that it will not go away, and I'm not great at predictions, so don't hold me to that, Tina, if something drastic does happen, but I agree. Someone who I respect a lot told me that 50 Cent is about to change and redo economic development for the state of Louisiana. 50 Cent, the rapper. 50. Yeah, the rapper. So he just made this huge, or is making this huge investment in Shreveport, where he's basically he's going to try to model what Tyler Perry did in Georgia. This whole film production studio up there in Shreveport. They just, the mayor of Shreveport just brought him down to meet with Governor Landry, and what was told to me is that he's about to do this whole big investment around the film tax credit, and the production tax credit. So I really don't see it going away. I think there could be a scenario, though, where it may not be as attractive as it currently is, but I just think there's been too much investment. There's just been too much investment, and yeah.
I wish we just had all these things forecasted, that they would be locked in beyond year by year by year.
Yeah.
It's hard to get clients and businesses to invest in things where we're like, we hope it exists next year.
You need predictability.
Yeah.
You need stability.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so
for any investment.
If we knew it was always forecasted for the next 5 years, then that's something we can get people to move on. It almost hurts it when we don't
when
have
it's not. But I think New Orleans, Baton Rouge, Shreveport, Alexandria, whomever has seen any type of investment from the film tax credit should have a unifying voice in preserving it. Yeah.
All right.
All right. Yeah.
What we're going to call it. Thank you so much. We appreciate you.
Thank y'all. I appreciate
Thank
you. I really enjoy this, and I'm thankful that you all, as business leaders, do this. I just want to express that to you all. Since the first time y'all brought me here, maybe a little over 2 years ago, it means a lot that y'all bring different voices in here to have these conversations. So please keep doing it.
No, thanks
Thank
for
you.
coming.
I appreciate
Thanks
it.
for being a
Thank
part
you.
of it.
Appreciate you, Cody. Yeah. Good to see you, brother. All right. Yep. You good. All right. All right. All right, folks.
All right.
Yeah.